Good early afternoon. We are live. I'm Andy Andrews. You've joined us on the Blue Plate Special here in Orange Beach, Alabama, where we have almost reached the boiling point, but that won't happen until tomorrow. I've already looked at the weather, and it's just hot today. It's going to be hot tomorrow. We're here in downtown Orange Beach. We have a whole raft of people here joining us today, and I've looked. You guys are from all over the United States. You guys are from Arkansas. Where's Arkansas? Hey, Arkansas, how are you doing? Let's see, Missouri, is that right? The Missouri are there. They're the invisible people. They stepped out. Okay, all right. And then Texas. Where's Texas? Hey, Texas, how are you doing? You know, Alabama has the Longhorns in the second game of the season. How confident are you? See, that's kind of how I feel. If you asked me how confident I was, I'd do that too. I'd go. So, I don't know. It's going to be a good game. Alabama. Who's from Alabama? All right. Some hometown folks. And you guys are from Birmingham. Do you know I graduated from Berry High School? Which, I mean, they'll tell you how old I am when you graduated from a high school that's no longer there. So, and then Colorado. Now, am I reading this right? Is the name of your your town Silt? That's like stuff that washes in on a flood, right? So that's how the town came to be. Okay, Silt, Colorado. You know, Colorado is such a beautiful, clean, pristine state, it seems like, and Silt just doesn't sound I'm just very curious how towns get their name. And then you guys are from New York. All right, you got your Yankees hat on. Yeah, you know, the Yankees are like the Dallas Cowboys and like the University of Alabama. Everybody either loves them or hates them. So I've got a buddy who is like this big Boston Red Sox fan, and he just like he just almost grovels when you mention the Yankees. But I've got some Yankee friends. Larry Pratt from Port Orchard, Washington. We're glad you're here. Marcy Carlson Taylor. Hey, and you love the professional noticer this morning? We had Brianna Spence, who is the illustrator for Pink Ernie and Blue Fred. The new children's book is out now, and we're very excited about that. So Pink Ernie and Blue Fred, you can get it, and Brianna is the star of the podcast. So andyandrews.com/pink is where you go specifically to grab that Pink Ernie, Blue Fred, and the big prank. And you know, we've got the animals too. We've got the stuffed Pink Ernie, the stuffed Blue Fred, and we have one Ray the Purple Fox. People ask me, you're not distributing Ray the Purple Fox? And I just say, we don't have bullies. We don't sell bullies. But you know, he turns out to be a friend in the book. Dawn Keller, hey, good to see you. Nancy Bergen, good morning. Monte Vista, Colorado, which I think is right near Silt. Dina Kilpatrick, good afternoon. Thank you for sharing. John Mason Smith, hey buddy, you just ordered Pink Ernie and Blue Fred package for your granddaughters. Yeah, and he says the reading of the same book over and over again to them is payback for their father. You know, when Austin and Adam were little and I would read this, you know, I'd read the books to them at night, and I would come in and they'd go, read this one, Dad. And I'm like, oh, really? Do we have to read that one again? And Yes, Dad, this is our favorite one. And I would read and I would like try to skip a couple of pages. I'd try to turn 2 or 3 at a time, and they weren't having any of it. It's like, you skipped one, Dad. Just like, you've got it memorized. Why do you want me to read it? David Huco, good afternoon. 94-degree Minnesota. Woo. Christy Woods, my sister. Chris Comer, happy 2 days after your birthday, Chris. Juice DeWitt. Hey, we got rain here. Hoping the fires go out. Leslie Ann Tarabella. She is the author of 3 great books so far. And she's also a very valued contributor on Wisdom Harbor. Leslie Ann, we need you to come in. We got some stuff for you to film. So come in anytime. Ron Reams, hey buddy. Good afternoon, Ron Reams. Ron Reams was a former anchorman in this area. And so every time I see Ron's name, I think, Ron Reams. So Shelly Hess, hey, how you doing? Becky Otterberry. Wendy Tucker. Wendy Tucker, hot. Yeah. Andy Andrews, hot too. Actually, her last name is Hot. Okay, we have something special today. Martin Simmons from Milton, Florida. And Martin is the head goober of chapter 92 of the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club. You need to come in sometime and see our stuff. Heather Olson from Utah, Bonnie Klein from Beaumont, Texas. You know, Beaumont, Texas, that's a cool place to see one of the longest distances you'll ever see on a highway sign. Because you go into Beaumont on I-10, and it'll tell you El Paso's like 950 miles or something like that. Matt Wilson. Hey, Matt is the father of the D1 prospect Chandler Wilson in football and the D1 prospect Daigle Wilson in softball. I mean, they can't keep their mind on one sport. They're just like back and forth all the time. I can't wait for softball season to start because I am a big fan of the Orange Beach Lady Makos. 3-time state champion Orange Beach Lady Makos. I mean, I'm telling you, we are great, as if I have any part in it. But you know, when you're winning, you say, hey, we got them. We beat them. We won the state championship 3 times. But if you lose, it's like, they didn't have their best game. Fans take all the credit when you win and none of the blame when you lose. Anyway, Matt, glad you're here. Today, we have something very special. Hey, you know, I had a buddy who went fishing last night. Or actually, this morning. Lee Hamilton. I met Lee because he was the governor's helicopter pilot. And he was like the #1 helicopter pilot in the state that would fly for the Alabama law enforcement people. And so the boys and I got to spend some time with Lee. And so, but he's down here, went fishing last night with Brandon Thompson, who is the fishing boss. And he and Brandon caught speckled trout and redfish, and I got invited, but they didn't invite me till the last minute, which just kind of like, I thought was kind of rude. You know, I mean, you'd think that it's a fishing trip, you're going to give somebody like a month or so to clear their calendar, but it's like, hey, you want to go fishing? Yeah, but I can't. So thank you, Lee. Thank you, Brandon. Anyway, I'm glad you guys had a great trip. We have a very special show today where we are going to look back and comment on some of the craziest, most memorable things that happened on this date in history. It is August 22nd, and if we skip 365 days, sometimes 366 because of leap year, but if we go back in time, we're going to hit the best moments because there are some amazing things that happened on August 22nd. Did you know, for instance, in 565, on August 22nd, that was the first time anybody reported sighting a monster in Loch Ness. Can you believe that, though? 565? They've been seeing that thing for 1,600 years? 1,500 something? In 1775. Now, we're going from 565 to 1775. So, obviously, nothing happened for 1,200 years on August 22nd. I mean, it was just kind of a blank on August 22nd for 1,200 years. But in 1775, the King of Great Britain, George III, proclaimed the American colonies to be in open rebellion and ordered his officials to suppress it. Now, I know he's a king, but you think you're a pretty big deal when you can look at something 2,000 miles away and go, suppress it.
It'll only take 3 weeks for the message to get there.
That's exactly right. Oh my gosh, suppress it. Oh God. All right, in 1849, I love this one because we're getting really modern here. In 1849, the first air raid in history. It's the first air raid in 1849. Now, you may be wondering about an air raid before airplanes were invented, but Austria launched balloons. No pilots in them or anything, no people in them, just balloons. They launched balloons against the Italian city of Venice. Now, I gotta say, that's all I found out. I mean, in researching that, it said that Austria launched pilotless balloons against Venice. Doesn't say the balloons carried anything. They obviously didn't have any people in them, but it didn't say that they had explosives or anything. It's just balloons. So for all Venice knew, Austria was wishing them happy birthday.
I mean, we got pretty worked up over that balloon in Montana.
That's true. That's true. In 1865, now I want you to think about what's happening in 1865. The Civil War has just ended, or is just ending. I think it's just ended because it ended in April. And so, August 22nd, 1865, William Shepard is issued the first U.S. patent for liquid soap. Now think about how long that took to catch on. Because, I mean, do you guys remember when there wasn't any liquid soap around? And then all of a sudden, there's all these pump things everywhere. In fact, the only place that had liquid soap was gasoline bathrooms, gas station bathrooms. Dr. Barb says, happy Tuesday. Dr. Barb, how are you doing? I am so glad to hear from you. I was thinking about you and Lieutenant Dan this morning, so I'm glad you're here. In 1877, so this is 12 years after the Civil War, but out west, things are still kind of crazy. 1877, to escape the cavalry, the Nez Perce Indians fled into Yellowstone National Park. But when they got into the park, they got into a traffic jam. They couldn't park their horses anywhere, and they were captured. They fled into the park, and there was a big traffic jam with campers and stuff right around Old Faithful. And they were, when they got into the park, they were terrified because they thought they saw a grizzly bear that was coming up to them, but it was actually a bear that was only asking for a picnic, a basket. It was Yogi, who was in Yellowstone, but thought he was in Jellystone. He had a little cub with him. And the Nez Perce, their word for cub, their word for bear cub is Boo Boo. And they called that cub Boo Boo. This is all absolutely true. August 22nd, 1870 something. 1877. It's all true. You know, it is amazing what happens to some of these characters like Yogi and Boo Boo. I was thinking the other day about how tragic it is that, you know, what happens to television families and all. Like, if you look at, like, All in the Family, Carroll O'Connor, who played Archie Bunker, he went on to do In the Heat of the Night. Jean Stapleton, who played Archie's wife, she went on to do some television movies and stuff. I don't think she did another series. Michael, who was Rob Reiner, went on to be just an incredible director. He directed The Princess Bride, Stand By Me, a lot of great things, which, you know, when you think about the television people who came out to be great directors. I mean, there's Penny Marshall that did A League of Their Own, Ron Howard, Apollo 13, and tons of stuff, and Rob Reiner doing Princess Bride. It is amazing that some of the greatest directors of that generation were Meathead, Laverne, and Opie. But so Rob Reiner went on to be a director. Sally Struthers went on to cry in Humane Society commercials. She did a lot of those. But those people at least had work, you know? If you think about like the Andy Griffith Show, you know, Andy did Matlock. Barney did movies. Aunt Bee did movies. Aunt Bee was in the first Benji movie. But then there were some television shows that their stars, for whatever reason. I mean, you know, the Gilligan's Island people didn't get much work. I don't know why, but they didn't get. You didn't see them on a lot of stuff. And the Jetsons got none. I mean, George Jetson, you never saw him in another thing. He was so typed. And Jane, his wife, did you ever see her in anything? Think about Fred Flintstone. Fred, Wilma, Barney, and Betty. Nothing after that show. Nothing. And then to be Pebbles and Bam Bam, child stars, and to grow up and never get another role. I mean, Pebbles, she made some money with a cereal thing, you know, Fruity Pebbles. But I mean, it's sad. You look at some of the things happening in Hollywood. How do we get off on that? I don't know. In 1902, U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt became the first U.S. president to ride in a car. And of course, that was back when somebody thought that going 15 miles an hour, like your heart would stop or whatever. So I wonder if the Secret Service said, no, don't do it, don't do it. In 1921, it began the rise of J. Edgar Hoover. Okay, because in 1921, on this date, August 22nd, in 1921, J. Edgar Hoover was appointed Assistant Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Assistant Director. And if you look at the files that that particular gathering where they presented him with that particular job, he wore a nice shawl over a mid-length dress and pearls. J. Edgar Hoover. In 1927, you're gonna love this. On August 22nd, 1927, Babe Ruth hit his 40th home run on the way to his 60 home run season, which was a record at the time. And but he hit it in New York's 9-4 loss to the Cleveland Indians. You know, if you got to lose to somebody, you don't want to lose to Cleveland. Now, Dr. Barb, Dr. Barb would disagree with me. She has Cleveland Indian, what do you call, season tickets. I mean, she's got like the box. I mean, she sits right next to the Indian, which, isn't it the Cleveland Native Americans now? I don't know. Are they still calling them Indians? I don't know. Yeah, I always tell Dr. Barb that the only bad thing about going to Cleveland is that when you get to Cleveland, you're in Cleveland. 1941, Nazi troops reached Leningrad on this day in 1941. Boy, that was a big mistake. That was one we were glad Hitler made. What an idiot. You know, I mean, you know how we say that if you don't know history, you're going to repeat it? Well, there's evidence. Hitler was a crappy student because Napoleon had already made that mistake. He had already tried to take Russia and got caught in the winter. And then here's Hitler. Okay, there you go. 1942. Hey, this is kind of interesting. On the very next year, in 1942, or maybe, no, same year, 1942, same day, Brazil declared war at the same time on Germany, Japan, and Italy. Now, that's pretty ambitious, isn't it? For Brazil.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, when a world war is going on, don't you want to kind of keep your head down? I mean, don't you want to keep, hey, no, we're not here. We're not here. No, we're here in South America. We're in the jungle. You fly over us. We're not here. But you're going to stick your head up and go, I declare war on you, and on you. I don't get it. It's like the Bahamas declaring war on America and Cuba and Brazil. In 1944, Adolf Hitler ordered Paris to be destroyed. Now, how many of you think Paris was destroyed? Nope, you're right. It was not. There's a key guy who disobeyed him and didn't pass the order on. And so Paris was saved. Even though Hitler, what like a vindictive little fourth grader he was. I mean, he was just like somebody had kicked him in the shins and taken his marbles, and he was going to take it out on everybody. God, 1949. No, 45. 1945. August 11th. No, twice that. August 22nd, 1945, the Vietnam conflict began as Ho Chi Minh led a successful coup. Now, that was 1945 that Vietnam began. And everybody thinks of like the late 60s as us in Vietnam, but it was only 10 years later, 1955, that we got involved in Vietnam. America became involved in Vietnam in 1955, and we declared ourselves advisors. We were only advisors. We were there, and we never changed that status. We were always there as advisors. Of course, we ended up dropping more than 7.5 million tons of advice on them, which was, by the way, double the amount dropped on Europe and Asia during World War II. Can you imagine that? You think about that little speck of Vietnam, and we dropped 7.5 million tons of bombs on, and that's twice as much as was dropped in entire World War II on Europe and the Japanese islands. Okay, in 1951, which this is just 6 years after World War II has ended, in 1951, guess who appeared in the Olympic Stadium in Berlin before 75,052 people? Now, you're thinking 6 years after World War II, Berlin Stadium, where Hitler stood up, and now the mood has changed a little bit since Hitler. Harlem Globetrotters. Can you believe that? Harlem Globetrotters, 1951. They played in Berlin in front of 75,000 people. In 1958, Great Britain, this goes down as a stupid decision to me. But in 1958, Great Britain performed an atmospheric nuclear test and they had a choice, obviously, of where they're going to perform this test. They're going to do it out in the Pacific around the atolls, and they have, there's 1,000 islands to choose, What did they choose? Bless you. They chose Christmas Island. Why would you choose? You got all those islands to choose from. It's like, I know where we'll go. Let's make sure we tell them Merry Christmas. We'll set Christmas with a big bang. Have you seen Oppenheimer yet? Seen that? Yeah. Did you notice that toward the end of the movie, when they're, Oppenheimer's coming in to be, celebrated and everything, people are in there waving their American flags. Did you notice those flags have 50 stars? I mean, it was in the 1940s, but those flags had 50 stars. Wrong flag. 1965, another baseball thing for you. 1965, San Francisco Giants pitcher Juan Marichal. Do you guys remember Juan Marichal? You need to look up Juan Marichal on YouTube. Look at this pitcher, Juan Marichal, because Juan Marichal would, when he wound up, he would throw his leg so high up in the air. Do you remember this? I mean, it was like way up here, and then he'd come down. There ain't no way. He was rocked back so far, there's no way he could see the plate and then come down, boom. Anyway, on this day, he wasn't worrying about pitching. He was at bat. He was a National League pitcher. And this was when pitchers were batting. And he was at bat, and the LA Dodger catcher, John Roseboro, said something to him, and he hit the catcher in the head with a bat. It caused a 14-minute brawl on the field. I mean, they had to drag him off. He's hitting the guy in the head with a bat. You can see that on YouTube too, by the way. But Juan Marichal, man, he that rock back. See, I grew up in Dothan, Alabama, which I played Little League Baseball in Dothan, Alabama. And if you remember the Crimson Tide quarterback for 2 national championships, his name was Stedman Shealy. Stedman was a year older than me, and Stedman pitched in Little League, and he pitched like Juan Marichal. His leg went way up, and he came over, and you know, I mean, who knew he was going to end up being the national championship quarterback for Alabama 2 times? But I'll tell you this, we were all scared to death of him. I mean, you know, he could have been Juan Marichal in Little League for all we knew, because everybody was scared to death to go out and play against Stedman. 1969, the Beatles' last official group photo session. And you know who was standing there when it happened? Yoko Ono. Yep. A lot of people credit her with splitting up the Beatles.
You seen I just saw it circulating again recently, the video when they're performing with Chuck Berry, and she's on the stage behind them, and she's like...
Yeah, I see, a lot of people credit her with splitting up the Beatles.
Oh, yeah.
I just credit her with having a horrible voice. That's what I credit her with. Last official photo session, 1984. The last Volkswagen Rabbit was produced. The last one rolled off the assembly line, and car people all over the world went, it's about time. Get rid of that stupid thing. And you know, make sure you keep the Gremlin under wraps too. And the Pacer. Remember when those cars all kind of looked like that? It's like weird boxes going down. 1989, Nolan Ryan struck out his 5,000th batter. You know who it was? Ricky Henderson. You know Nolan Ryan, did he throw 5 no-hitters or 7? 7. 7 no-hitters. I knew it was one or the other. Did you know that he did not throw the most no-hitters? Do you know there's a guy who threw 900 no-hitters? 240-something perfect games. I'm not making it up. I'll tell you who it was in just a minute. But Ricky Henderson was the 5,000th guy to go down to Nolan Ryan. In 1994, do you remember the DNA testing linked O.J. to the murder of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman? Do you remember the DNA testing linked him? That still bothers me. I was in San Diego in a Nordstrom's. This is a bunch of years ago, but in San Diego in Nordstrom's in the men's department, and I was buying a couple of shirts, and I'm paying for them, and I'd seen this guy over here that was dealing with ties and shirts, and he looked so familiar to me, and I could not figure out who he was. And I asked the lady, I said, do I know that guy from somewhere? And she said, that's Ron Goldman's father. Oh, do you remember him? He had the mustache. And that has always been so sad to me. I mean, here he is working at Nordstrom's in the men's department. You know, very recognizable person, recognized for nothing he wants to be recognized for. I just always thought that was so sad. So, yeah, 240 something perfect games, 900 no hitters, won 10,000 games as a pitcher. I'll tell you in a minute. 2004, August 22nd, 2004, the painting The Scream by Edvard Munch was stolen again from the Munch Museum in Oslo, Norway. Again, the first time it was stolen was during the Olympics, during the opening things, and somebody just walked in and took it while everybody was watching the Olympic Games. Yeah. And but that time it was stolen at gunpoint. Both times it was recovered after a long period of time, though. And here's the last one. In 2022, August 22, 2022, Dr. Anthony Fauci announces he will step down as Chief Medical Advisor to the U.S. President and as Director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And he said, I have done all I can. And all across the world, people said, thank God. Thank God you've done all you could. Okay. Okay, so, you ready? He won 10,000 games. 900 and something no-hitters, 240 something perfect games. And he pitched underhanded. His name was Eddie. Hang on. I'll tell you. Hang on. I'll tell you. Eddie Fegner. Eddie Fegner, the king in his court. He was a softball pitcher, underhanded pitcher. And after World War II, he was pitching in the Pacific Northwest. Nobody could hit him. Nobody could hit him. And he was pitching for some, semi-pro team in the Pacific Northwest, and they beat some team 33-0. And they were in a restaurant afterwards, and the manager of the other team said some smart aleck thing to Eddie Fegner, and he turned around and he said, you guys are so pathetic, I could beat you with just my catcher. And the guy said, really? Put your money where your mouth is. So Fegner put $100 up, which in 1946 was a lot of money. And he said, but you got to give me 2 other players to bat so that we can't get stranded on the bases. So they went and played them. And the 2 guys that they had, they put one at shortstop and one at first base. So pitcher, catcher, shortstop, first baseman. They beat them 7-0. and word got out, and they started traveling around. And then in 1951, all four of them were out of work at the same time, and they said, we should do this for a living. And so they started traveling and started playing all comers. Anybody, they just go to a town and say, get your 9 best players out here and we'll play them. 4 of us against 9 of you. And so as word gets around, they're charging $1 for adults and 50 cents for kids. And they're getting, people are like showing up. And so they are playing for the gate. You know, we will play you and we take the gate. And that's kind of how they made their living. And so he, somebody saw him and put him on the Tonight Show. And Johnny Carson put a cigar in his mouth, and from 43 feet away, Eddie Feigner knocked it out of his mouth. Then he was on the Mike Douglas show, and he was pitching and showing what he could do. And Mike Douglas brought out Mickey Mantle, who was at the time with the Yankees. And Eddie Feigner struck him out on 3 pitches. Underhanded, right? All right, so then they, I think it was in 1964, 65, right around in there, there was an exhibition game in California for a big charity. And it was during the All-Star break. And so Leo Durocher was gonna, he was managing the celebrity team, which had guys who were, you know, television stars and all like that. And so in the middle of the game, he brings in a relief pitcher, and it's Eddie Feigner. And Eddie Feigner faced Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Brooks Robinson, Maury Wills, Roberto Clemente, and Harmon Killebrew in a row, and struck them all out. Struck them all out in a row. In that game, he struck Pete Rose out twice. And you can see, you can actually see some video of Feigner striking out Willie Mays, and he threw him a changeup that Willie Mays, I mean, all of them just walked away from the plate after striking out, just walked away laughing. They just couldn't believe it. But Sports Illustrated clocked his pitch at 114 miles an hour. Now think about this. The fastest a major league pitcher has ever pitched is 106. And this guy threw 114. And then you're seeing that from 43 feet away, not 60 feet away. I mean, these guys, they couldn't hit him. There was no way. And then he had to move to first base. If somebody got on first base, he had to move to first base, which he would throw the ball behind his back and pick them off. Just like, you know, be on the mound and go, whew, like that. And it was unbelievable. The ESPN called Eddie Feigner the most underrated athlete of all time. And ESPN also listed the King and his court in the top 10 teams, everything teams, top 10 teams of all time. And here's the coolest, I guess, the thing that I found out about him is that you would think, throwing 114 miles an hour, you'd think some major leagues would be interested, right? You'd think they would want to sign him. Well, they did. They did. There were a lot of them tried to sign him, and the Yankees really put a push on. However, Willie Mays was the highest paid major leaguer in the majors at the time. He was making $160,000 a year, but Eddie Feiner would not sign with the major league team because he was making $100,000 a month. Charging $1 an adult, 50 cents a kid, going around. I mean, they were playing 2-3 games a day, and you know, he's having 1,000 people show up every game, 2,000 game. So he's making $100,000 a month. So he wouldn't play Major League Ball. The king in his court won 9,743 games. Eddie struck out 141,517 batters. He fired 930 no-hitters and pitched 238 perfect games. Eddie Feiner, the king in his court. And you may wonder, how come I know so much about Eddie Feiner? Well, on wisdomharbor.com, we are producing a Bet You Didn't Know about Eddie Feiner. There's so you guys have to, if you haven't joined our streaming service, you got to join wisdomharbor.com. One of the docs is Bet You Didn't Know, and it's all Bet You Didn't Know so and so, and so we're producing one right now on the king in his court, and you'll see the videos of him throwing. You'll see him striking out Willie Mays and Roberto Clemente and Willie McCovey, and you'll see video of him throwing the ball behind his back to pick off somebody at first. But come on, this is wisdomharbor.com, where our stated goal, this is going in tons of schools, and our stated goal is to create the next greatest generation. This is what we're after. And so we need parents, grandparents, police stations, restaurateurs, business owners, fire stations, radio station. We need you guys to join, because we need to put the whole town on the field. And we're going to create the next greatest generation, starting with your school system, with your hometown. And this is very inexpensive. I mean, $27.99 for the year, okay? And so, come on, let's go. We appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate y'all joining us in the studio. And we'll see you next time here on the Blue Plate Special.